pay that down somewhat.
If we do that though, can we be reimbursed or not?
No. No.
And the bond payment is significant once we get into it, so.
Yeah.
Kyle.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, who's our CFO again?
Connie.
Didn't Connie say, I mean, they were planning on paying for that and getting reimbursed, and they haven't paid for any of that work yet, so there's nothing to reimburse. So it's not like they're out money right now.
Right.
It depends on what the cost of that comes in. If it comes in at 300,000, depending on who builds it and all that, so that was the conversation at the last meeting, so.
That's, yeah.
And then, did you guys have a further discussion? Did the city want to be, take it as a city project, or was that going to fall back? I think
Bill
that's
and
where
Jeff and I haven't met because of
Okay.
the holidays yet,
Okay.
but that's something we'll do. I mean, I think that probably makes sense, but we have to talk about it.
Okay, all right.
No, you're right, Ed. They're definitely not out anything. I just don't want to hold them up,
Correct.
but I guess I think they're looking for more of a letter, more than a letter of intent from us, but, I just was thinking, but, so let's talk about the 1.25 million. I'll just open, this is just open, so I don't want to speak for the group. I know what I want to do with it. Kelly?
What do you want to do?
Not what I want. What I think would be in the downtown's best interest would be to put it towards a new streetscape. We've talked about Riverwalk, we've talked about a lot of things, but I would love it if we could partner with the city of Manistee and potentially look at doing property assessment like what happened over 20 years ago when we did the last streetscape, and do a streetscape replacement, what that looks like could be discussed, but I would like the focus to be on River Street and the side streets. And my thought there is it's obviously looking tired, and to attract investors, whether it be commercial, retail, restaurant, whatever that looks like, that's a big part of it. I mean, people aren't going to want to invest if we have a tired looking downtown. So that's kind of where my head is at, but.
And the combination of the pavers and the cement currently isn't working with the height differences and the turf hazards and the curves and things like that. So that's something that could be addressed versus, we've been paying about $30,000 or whatever the DDA funds for the last couple of years to replace sections of pavers, but it's like one block. So.
So you're talking about sidewalks, curb, street, bump outs?
Yeah. Yeah.
We were downtown this past weekend on Saturday, and it just was struck by how hard everything looks down here. I really like to, I think,
To soften it up.
I'd like to echo your sentiments. I'm seeing it from your perspective on that.
Yes, I agree with that. I would go further. The River Street needs to be public space. There needs to be bump outs all up and down the street, weaving a lane through it, directing people to park in in all of our parking lots, and getting people out of their cars and walking around and sitting under trees in bump outs, eating, listening to music, where we accommodate people with, appropriate lighting and, electricity. We light the place differently, and it becomes public space. Drawing vendors and, artists and people to enjoy the public space. It's a huge asset for us, and it's devoted now to cars.
You just painted a picture.
Yeah, well, and the thing that I noticed too, Barry mentioned last week the TIF plan, right? And Christina very kindly printed that for us. And right here in the TIF plan, talking about the streetscape, you know, it says improvements, including LED lighting, public Wi-Fi, and a sound system, right? All of which you mentioned. And so, you know, I think that what Barry brought, I think that we do need to keep in mind, like, this is a document that, you know, has been agreed to, and we obviously need to hold true to it. And I think that what you just said is very much in line with what's presented here.
Yeah, I think the question before us is, you know, given that we can't afford to do everything in, you know, the MSU study design or our TIF plan, what's the priority? And, you know, I had a conversation with Nick, you know, somewhere around here. He's in total agreement. We should loop in as many of the city council in our, you know, priority process as possible, so that this just, you know, is part of the community process. So we need to have a community meeting to prioritize which ends, you know, we're going to start with, you know, and the city council can be focusing on finding additional funding sources to finish it.
I just want to add that I am totally in agreement in all of what is going on. But you put all this money into the beautification of landscaping and trees and bump outs. What's the accountability to the business owners that have boarded up windows or non-existent windows? I'll just say Manistee and just put some Christmas decorations, but it's the first time in 11 months that would, I mean, that is a huge, you know, they have now started doing some cool things with Redeemed, and I don't just have to pick on them, but there's some boarded up windows, scaffolding out every holiday on the west end of River Street. So what's the accountability to clean that up if we're going to put all this money into streetscape?
It's a good question, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I look at it like if you are building value, then that value goes also to property owners and it attracts investors. I mean, we spent so much time talking about blight, and we're still, it's not been an effective conversation, but I would rather put that time and energy into the public asset aspect of it, so the public asset attracts a private investor for the types of properties that you're referring to. And we have done some things, you know, we've done facade grants and those types of things, but there's only so much we as a public entity can do, and that's just how I look at it. I mean, if you go to other beautiful downtowns, what comes first? Is it the business and the nice restaurant, or is it the nice streetscape that business or restaurant is attracted to? I don't know the answer to that, but I would like to think that if we provide a place that is nice to do business and people want to visit, then that restaurant owner is going to want to open a restaurant. People are going to want. That's where my head goes. But
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And you know, I was having a conversation with Kelly a while back. I'm sorry for quoting you, you know, like out of context. She said, you know, the job of the city is to, you know, make a beautiful place and keep it full, draw people in. And then, you know, it's up to the business owners to, you know, take advantage of that. I'm sorry I quoted you out of context. But I agree with that. I think that's right. And, you know, there's programming that we can look into to support businesses, you know, individual businesses, but we can't do that with bonding money.
right.
And just to address it, if I may, Stacy, Mark, and I have been discussing Blight, and we are going to take a trip to Manistee and talk to them about some of their policies, and we've been talking to some of the council members about that as well.
That's good. I just
So
wanted to
it's on the radar.
Yeah.
To try and, you know, how do we move forward, what has been successful in other areas. Ken Urban actually started us with some of those articles about the value of your downtown. And then from there was a couple other articles that I found that actually had some specific ordinance written and things like that. So I've been trying to include council in those discussions, because they are having it as well. So hopefully in the future, I'll get something quick.
Do we anticipate that there will be any sort of backlash from people who perhaps are not paying as much attention to all of this if we prioritize the downtown streetscape as opposed to, because the Riverwalk is in the TIF plan also. So I guess I'm just wondering if there's something that can be stated from the city or from this board as, you know, the reasoning behind.
We can't do it all,
Right,
and what drives commerce,
right.
you know, that's how I look at it.
No, I understand that, I'm just wondering if there will be people whose priority is the Riverwalk.
Well, part of that, you know, MSU design includes
Right.
the Riverwalk and businesses, helping businesses face the Riverwalk and, you know, view that as another stream of customers. 250,000 is going into that with the West Shore money. I think it's a good question. Should there be more than that? You know, should we, you know, take a section and from River Street to the water's edge, make it this streetscape, the look that we want, so that it could be replicated up and down Riverwalk, up and down River Street, you know, up, you know, the side streets. I think it's a good question.
One more addition that you guys aren't aware of is we are looking into, with the help of City Manager Gamble, the Eba Grant, which it is a very competitive grant. There are millions of dollars in it. If we are selected, that we're focusing back on the Riverwalk, which the project fits. Again, competitive, can't guarantee it, but the chamber is looking avenues, you know, for avenues in that. The other thing is we did have that first round of consumers. We didn't make it. We weren't selected. Cadillac was, so that's a little bit of a sting. Kind of similar proposal, but we will keep, you know, trying to find those ways to tie business into the riverside, and the chamber knows that that is, you know, very advantageous to our community. So know that we're looking for those things and trying to figure out those pieces to make all of this package work, because we know they're both important.
And we also need to remember that the DDA has put in a significant amount of money into the Riverwalk over the past 30 years, including bond to help build it. A lot of maintenance every single year that we've paid for. So it's not like the DDA hasn't been contributing towards the Riverwalk, whether it be, you know, redoing the railings or, you know, power washing and sealing, but a lot of volunteer work, obviously. But the Riverwalk's also a park, so there's, you know, there's other things going on there. But it's not the first thing that people see when they turn their cars off of US 31 either. It's a huge asset, and I think it's one of the city of Manistee's biggest assets is the Riverwalk for sure. So it's not like we're saying, hey, we only have approximately 1.25, so we have to focus somewhere. And I don't think the Riverwalk should be left out of the discussion at all, but.
With some of the hotel that's coming and everything, do you know, does that include their portion of where they sit on Riverwalk?
So,
What hotel?
the Gateway project.
The casino has zero to do with it.
So what I can
It's
say
just-
is,
it's a-
there's gonna be a brownfield plan that will come with that this board will have to approve, because they're gonna be asked to give out tax capture on the increment that's created by the hotel to fund a number of different infrastructure, and the discussion had been to redo the Riverwalk from basically the bridge to the end of their property, access and all that sort of stuff. So with that said, that's a reimbursement mechanism, that's not a financing mechanism. So how that gets funded, whether it's a combination of maybe the developer funds it and gets reimbursed, or maybe there's another bond issued by the city or DDA, who knows? That hasn't been discussed, but that's just in the preliminary stages, but that's probably gonna be part of a brownfield plan. So there'll be one pretty good section that's likely to get redone.
Is the Riverwalk actually designated a park? Like,
No?
is there a designation for it that would allow it to have a lot more ability to capture those types of grant dollars at all?
It's treated like a, a public area, but it's not, I don't think designated officially as a city park. So it's kind of in this, hands.
Would it make a difference if it was?
I don't know that you could. I mean, I think it's listed in our Parks and Recreation plan
Okay.
as an asset, so it qualifies for trust fund grants and things like
Okay.
that. I don't think it's officially a park.
Okay. Okay.
I was just told it was. I'm on the Parks Commission, and I did ask that
They
question.
designated it
Yeah,
as
they
a
did say
park.
that.
Not sure. Anyway, it basically qualifies for most of the stuff that you'd be able to get funding for.
Okay.
So what's the next steps?
Well, we definitely need direction,
Mhm.
in order for me to help you, if you would like, look up vendors, or if there are priorities, we'll have to get bids for the bonds so that we know what we can afford, which would include like, some drawings of the areas or materials, things like that. Because Ed needs some basic numbers for the, project itself, right, Ed?
Here's the deal. You could go and do a notice of intent, which is the official triggering mechanism for this bond, in 3 weeks. Get Pat McGow, the bond counsel, to draw up very generic descriptions of what you want to do. So you can get that process started, and by doing that, then you can incur engineering costs and be reimbursed for them after the notice of intent is issued, and the referendum period has passed. However, once you do that, and I guess there's an advantage here, because the board has already said it's 1.5, you're gonna have to fit the project to that. So if you really wanted to get started, you could go down that path. The problem is, you're gonna have to tailor your project to meet those proceeds, plus any cash that the DDA wants to put in. And you might not know those numbers up front. So there's a little bit of a risk factor there from how much of a project can we do. The flip side of that is if you wait and you have to incur some engineering costs, you won't be able to get reimbursed for them. So it's a trade-off.
I think we need to figure out who our partners are too. What is this, and Bill and I talked about this a little bit. And I had asked, and obviously a lot's been going on, but I came here just when the last streetscape project was sort of happening. It was pre-ed also. So I don't have a very good memory of how that worked. But it'd be nice to look at history a little bit and figure out how that worked with assessments, DDA, bond, city contribution. It was a much larger project too, because there was water and different utilities.
Well, we issued $1.5 million of Michigan Transportation Fund bonds to help
Okay.
pay for the streetscape at the time.
Okay,
But that's pledging our Act 51 gas tax money.
okay,
And that has not even been broached with city council on any of that, because those funds are going towards all the other street needs at this point.
Okay.
But that was for 15 years. I think the DDA bond was a 20-year bond.
okay. So I think we have to see what the tolerance level is with council.
Okay, so is this individual discussions with council members? Is this something we?
I have had some individual discussions, but not with all of them. But I'm open to ideas here.
Okay, so sketching out a process to get us to the point where we file the notification and start the clock, right? Okay. The first decision is, how to get, a part, an engineering firm, a sub, to get the details in enough specificity for the bond proposal. Conversations with the council to find who wants to participate in the, priority discussion. That our vision is the MSU design, and the question is, which pieces do we attack first? And we get, council's input as to how much they want to be involved in the process, who wants to be involved. We get a proposal together, get a working group, decide on, what the working group's recommendation is, take it to the DDA, take it to the council, hire somebody, get the drawings done. At the point we hire somebody, we can start the clock.
Yeah, and again, it depends on how much money you want to spend out of pocket before you start getting reimbursed with the bond. If you get, another approach could be just get some pretty solid placeholders at a lower cost. You don't necessarily need numbers of drawings at that point. And then start that clock ticking faster. But again, it's that trade-off between timing and specificity, and there's going to be a cost factor in there as well. Jeff McCool was pretty involved with the first streetscape when he was with Adam Marsh too, and he may have a better recollection of the process in terms of your public participation and some of those things. So he might be a good resource just to pick his brain if he has. It's been a while, obviously, but.
It seems like we're gonna have to spend some money out of pocket that's not reimbursable to get to where we need to be. I mean, that's-
I have a dumb question. Is it, does the public have to vote on this fund? This doesn't go,
No.
okay.
Well, they do have a right of referendum. So once you issue the notice of intent, there's a period of time that they can submit a petition, and then it has to go to an electorate.
If a petition is submitted.
Right, and I will say, you mentioned street trees, that caused big controversy in the past, as did bump outs, and there was a leader that caused that to go to the street and called the fact they did a charter amendment. So my point there is you're gonna need to engage the public.
Charter amendment that
Prohibited trees in the downtown for a period of time.
We think that's sunset at this point, right?
Probably did, but I'm just saying that's something to keep in mind.
Is that organization still active?
No.
It wasn't an organization, it
Oh,
was one person leading.
Entity.
But that doesn't mean there aren't others in the community that might have strong feelings.
That's why I brought up bringing this to the public as soon as possible, with the explanation of what.
Well, and that implies spending more money because the public likes to see pretty pictures.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have something
So
show.
that's, again, it's that trade-off.
Somebody didn't want trees in our downtown.
Trees and bump outs were the two, because they were in the original plans.
Maybe that's changed now, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
A little softscaping would not hurt at all.
I think it was for like 20 years.
I can't
It
remember.
was significant.
Trees hide a lot of sense, you know? They do.
All right, Bruce, what's the next step? You painted it nicely.
Next step is, we, approach council. I don't think it needs to be formal at this point. And ask them what their level of participation, what level is that we're planning on, putting together a work group. And, starting, in the next couple of weeks with the intent to, come up with a recommendation that we can hand, or that we can use to hire somebody to paint group pictures.
How many DDA board members can be on a work group?
So maybe just one-on-one in the open meetings, wouldn't we have to just publicly?
So all
If
the
more
meetings-
than,
all the
more than
meetings would
one
have to be
meeting,
public?
then it would be a public meeting. Council would be the same, they would have, if you invite 2 council members and we have 2 DDA members,
Okay.
it would just have to be a public work session or.
Okay. Just curious,
Yeah.
what the meetings look like.
It's not even so big, right? Okay. I can make it.
So are we all agreeing this is what we want to do? Shaking heads.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I'd like to do more. But we're limited, right? So
Well,
I think
I
the
don't
limitations
think
we
we're
have-
limited, we're not limited yet.
Right.
But I think we
That's
just
true.
have to decide, okay, this is, we want a bond, right? And so we want the funds to go towards
Right.
this project. we need more people involved, we need public input, we need council input. I don't know if we need a vote on this, but this is a work session, we just have to decide what direction we're going, so we can start moving this ball.
Is there a Blight Committee already?
Their city of Manistee does have a Blight Committee.
It's kind of the recess.
I was gonna say, is it active? I mean, I just worry about spending, I really do, about all this money in these buildings that, since this was done 20 years ago, didn't raise to the occasion. So what would make them raise to the occasion now of beautification for downtown Manistee?
Private property, you know, and there's, some of them are the same property owners. You know, we can't change that, but we can, there's only a certain amount of things that we can control. And I'm not gonna let somebody stop me from doing what I, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I do.
But there's a lot of, I mean, there's an incredible amount of square footage downtown for the size town that we have. And so it's hard to make everything, for us to think everything's supposed to be a certain way.
But since the Blight Committee started, they have gone after them legally, have they not?
There's a consent agreement, and they're supposed to be done by, I think, May, on the 2 buildings that we've had problems
So
with.
we're not gonna scaffolding on the sidewalk.
No, that's what the court ruling says, we'll see if that happens.
Well, we did recently award them a facade grant for windows. So scaffolding's a good, it's progress. So, if you don't have scaffolding up, you're not working, so. Things within our control. Okay, so we have some direction.
So we're engaging council before we look at the vendors.
Form a work group.
Okay. All right, I will look up the Open Meetings Act just to make sure that we're in compliance, and I can send it to the board as well.
Ed, do you have any opinions about how we should proceed?
I think it's good to get council's buy-in, because they ultimately have to approve the bond.
Okay.
I think the scope of the project, defining what it is really important. You know, you're gonna get some differences of opinion on there, there may be some push there to use some of that for the river walk, so you don't have to hash that out a little bit.
Okay.
And I think the public engagement's gonna be really key, to make sure everybody's on board with that. I like the idea of going to Muskegon, but there's some communities that pass pretty stringent ordinances for property upkeep, and I don't think the city has that in the downtown, so that fact finding could be helpful potentially if there's an appetite for that, I don't know, that's a political question, but that's one way to push those property owners to fix up their stuff a little bit. And whether or not there's an appetite for an assessment on downtown is something that's the DDA or the chamber's gonna have to determine, probably by just kind of talking to the business owners and seeing.
Have you ever looked at how that worked?
I have not researched it, we could certainly do that, I don't know what the mechanism, I mean, there's a process that's laid out, but I'd have to look and see how they did it in the past.
My vague recollection, I think it was a certain amount per lineal foot of, through the property owner on River Street.
And that makes sense, that's a pretty standard.
Okay.
Way to do it.
Do you know the Blight Committee, have they looked at ordinance related solutions? Like what Ken sent around. There are options for special assessments that are targeted to vacant properties that remain vacant for an unused or underutilized for an extended period of time. The idea is collectively the downtown is a public asset, and it provides a mechanism, both for funding, support where it's needed, but also it somewhat punitive. It makes it not economically viable to leave your property in bad condition. And as far as I know, it's an option that I'm not aware that we've discussed.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the
So
Blight.
the Blight Committee was ad hoc,
Okay.
and there was a kind of lapse, Kelly jumped in here. There was reconvened, like they had, when he was still city manager. They came up with some kind of a resolution they wanted city council to pass. City council wasn't willing to pass that. Got sent back to administration. We drafted some bylaws for a, what's it called, neighborhood improvement and beautification, neighborhood and something. Committee, and the council, I don't believe, has acted on that yet, performed that, but that will become a standing committee. And then at that point, once the members get appointed, then that might be something they could look at. So I think that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Isn't Councilmember Sullivan, doesn't she work with Chief Glass and, was she on that committee? Okay. I know she's asked lots of questions about Blight, and that's been one of her priorities, so.
I know she's on for rides when she class, but she wasn't on.
Okay, thanks, Kelly.
Okay. We have some direction? Do you have some direction?
Yes.
Do you want more direction?
Do we want to do any priority project areas to bring up to council? Like, are we saying softscaping? Are we saying sidewalks?
So that's the subject of the work group,
Okay,
right?
that's.
So the process is, council, do you want to be involved? We're going to put together a work group. Yes, no, how many, who. We put together the work group, and then we start, talking as a work group to decide those kinds of questions. We make a recommendation to the DDA, and it goes to council. And somewhere in there, we may decide to start the clock
Thank you.
With the notice of intent.
with a notice of intent.
Okay.
That's fine.
What's the timeframe for something
For the bonding. I sent out a timeline, Kristen, you might want to send it back around. There's a pretty structured period once you issue the notice of intent, but the upfront process is kind of the unknown. So it's less than 6 months to actually go from notice of intent to having cash in hand. It could be closer to 4 even if everything falls together well, but the process upfront is what takes the time.
We met with them, Ed, you were there too, weren't you? Yeah, I'm like, who's that? And they haven't started the project yet, though, so they're willing to bump it to spring or whatever fits. They weren't set, because we have some easement issues and some other things that will have to take place, which that's what we're working with.
I think West Shore was thinking that we were anxious to get it done maybe more than we were, or the DDA was, and we were thinking West Shore was chomping at the bit to get it done, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, we've got some time here, we can, because it's not really impacting West Shore financially. Aesthetically it is, but not from a cash standpoint necessarily.
Okay.
This whole project, though, seeming pretty large, really needs to be coincided with the Gateway project going in, the bridge being closed, right? I mean, we have to look at all of that strategically and what would make sense to run a project of this size.
Yeah.
And that's where Jeff needs to get looped in, because there's gonna be a lot of disruptions with traffic with all the projects that are coming up. Including well, this will probably hopefully be done by then, but there's gonna be some reconstruction on 31 over a few years, so it's gonna be a mess.
Did you say mess?
Thanks, Ed.
Turn that somehow into more people wanting to come downtown
Well,
at that time.
Okay. we have a little bit more direction. Thank you all for direction. Direction. Okay. Anything else?
Can I ask too, if anything is ever offered to merchants in terms of seminars with making their businesses better, customer service, all of the above?
The chamber, many times over the years, has offered different seminars and things like that. That's typically been a chamber offering, I believe. I'm looking at you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, we actually do have a customer service grant that we are working with. We received it last year from Consumers Energy. And so we're putting those pieces together right now. So that's actually a very timely question that retail stores, restaurants could send employees to. So I'm thinking that that's gonna roll out in the spring, but don't quote me on the date yet. We're putting all those in place.
When I was a merchant in Grand Haven, we loved those seminars and they helped tremendously.
At merchant meetings, we've talked about marketing. I've tried to bring in some different resources for the merchants. But we haven't actually done on those types of calls, like one specifically individual that could do let's talk about marketing for 15 minutes or something like that. So that could be something maybe in the future if we had a guest at the merchant meeting for 15 minutes or something that they might be interested in. I can broach that with them next week.
And I think I mentioned to you whiz-bang training.
Yes.
Out of Grand Haven, they're really, really good.
Thanks, Kelly.
He's everywhere now, so I don't know how big he would be, but.
And there's lots of resources and tools online where you can watch it at your own time frame, but I think it's providing those tools so they know where to look. I don't know about you guys, but it's easier when someone sends me an email and say, oh, here's things that you can view for this, or here's things that you can view for this, which would also segment to the customer service training that's offered. And I believe the college is doing something too. Annie? No? Okay.
I don't think so. Is
Okay.
Is it like a partnership?
I believe there's another grant that West Shore was creating, a customer service type
Yeah,
program, but I don't
heard-
think it's all determined
I've
yet
heard
either.
mumblings about that.
Okay, we'll
but
get back to you on that
no
one. as soon as
details.
there's more details.
Yeah.
Last March, the chamber hosted, right, a weekend, like a 2-day, there were seminars.
We did a business, during the business expo, we had a lunch with a couple of speakers,
Yeah.
talking about cybersecurity and things like that, with the pandemic that kind of
But there were
revised some of
several,
our model. So we're.
there were several online classes though within that.
Oh, the
2-day period.
entrepreneurial day.
Yeah, there
Yes,
you go.
yes.
Okay, are those links still?
Those are now on, the economic development website is launched on the chamber. So if you go to the chamber's website, there are 3 boxes. Economic development one is the one way to the right. You can go out there and then there'll be an entrepreneurial tab and those sessions are there.
Yeah, I was able to
That
view
wasn't-
a few of those and they were excellent resource materials.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Make motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor? I guess we don't need that. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next week.